Hello. I'm seeing sound lines bumping. I think we're in business here. Uh, hello. Hi. Thank
Hello,
you.
hi.
Yes. But a wild Deborah has appeared. Hello. Thank you all for joining us for Demiplanar with B. Dave Walters, where apparently what this show has become is I get fascinating people and I just ask them weird questions for an hour. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in chat. Put the capital question in front of it, in caps, and our mods will capture it and they will keep track of it. My question list is over here. So if you see me looking over there on occasion, it's because I see questions popping in. Deborah, if someone just arrived here from the year 2007, just like stepped out of a portal and has no idea who
They're
you
like,
are,
what's an iPhone? And
right?
then they're
Exactly. What's this Twitch the kids are on about? Yeah. Who are you and where might people know you from?
um gosh, yeah. I'm Deborah Ann Woll. I am a dorky person, a nerdy person, with pride, a proud dorky nerd. As well as you'll might know me from a show on HBO called True Blood, where I played a vampire, a teenage vampire, which sounds like a B movie from the 60s. I
You
was a
you
teenage
you
vampire.
literally were a teenage
I
vampire.
was
No,
a teenage vampire.
that happened. Yeah.
um, and then I moved on to a Netflix series, which was Marvel's Daredevil, where I played an investigative reporter, Karen Page, sort of sidekick to Daredevil, the superhero. And then since then, it's been a few movies in between all of that, but I have really dove deep into the Dungeons and Dragons RPG world. And I have a show called Relics and Rarities. It's one season of 6 episodes, but I'm so proud of it,
Hmm.
where we play D&D. And I have a bunch of other one-shots all over the internet, many of which are with yourself, either playing or running. And yeah, that's about it for now.
That is true. We have a not insignificant catalog together at this
We do.
point.
It
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
more than 7 degrees.
Yeah. Like you could fill a weekend watching stuff that just we've done. Right.
Yeah, pretty
Um
much.
so let me start off with a simple question. Let's just start with a softball.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, how do you define character?
Wow.
I'm like, let me light my pipe with my, leather pads on my tweed jacket.
Yeah.
Let's put on our ascots and berets and
Our
pontificate.
brandy snifters here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, how do I define character?
Mhm.
Well, I'm actually I have an answer for this. So I find that character is a mix of two things. It is almost never innate traits, right? So what we tend to think of as character, oh, that person is this or that. I actually think those are completely unuseful.
Mhm.
I think one, they're unuseful because it's almost impossible to know yourself that clearly and succinctly. Also, you are too complex to be that succinct, or that yeah, specific, right? We are many things. We are different things at different times, right? I can be very outgoing and excited amongst my best friends and extremely shy with strangers in public. I can be very brave when I'm acting and very risk averse in my real life, so there are many different things. And as an actor, I have to believe that I have the capability for all things. So character for me, like I said, is a mix of two things. One, it's our actions. It's the things that we
Mhm.
do. I
Mhm.
think we learn much more about who people are by the choices that they make and the things that they throw their energy towards.
Mhm.
So that's one. The other, I would maybe say almost like point of view,
Mhm.
or one of my favorite acting books is Declan Donnellan's The Actor and the Target. And he talks about targets and it's the closest book I've ever read to my process of acting, which is that it's really about shifting focus to different targets. So I'm not thinking, be scared. I'm opening up the letter that I received that I'm pretty sure is going to tell me that someone I love is in trouble, right?
Mhm.
So it's the relationship to that thing. So much of of acting is like seeing through that person's eyes, and what do they see when they see that letter. Now, Deborah, who doesn't know the person for whom that letter's about, has no specific relationship to that piece of paper. But the character that I'm playing, who knows that person, and I have a whole experience with them, has a much different reaction to that target. And that target can be a thing, it can be a person, it can be a concept or an idea. Mm-hmm. So it's that mix of those two, perspective, point of view, and then the actions that we take based upon that.
Give me the name of that book again. Just it was The Actor and the Target? Actor
and the Target by Declan Donnellan. Yep. It's a fantastic book on acting. I recommend all actors read it, obviously, but certainly, I mean, it kind of works for anyone because it does give you insight into why things affect us, why certain things are wounds. How is it that a piece of paper, it's just a piece of paper, but what's written upon it and how your relationship to what is written upon it completely changes from one person to the next. I was talking with actually Charlie Cox this last weekend, and he was talking about, we all have these weird different wounds, and that, you could say, if I'm insecure about having a big nose, let's say, because someone in my childhood told me that and made me feel bad about it, I could say, you've got a sizable nose, and it might not bother you at all because you've never had that, wound. Whereas if you were to say it to me, it's primal and horrible and erupts something within me. And obviously we can never know those things specifically about people, but it's amazing how the statements themselves are neutral, and it's our relationship to them that kind of makes it,
Yeah, it's, in times long past, in another life, I was a life coach and wrote like a nationally syndicated advice column. And, one of
the many lives of B-Day.
I mean, there's been like 6, honestly, just sedimentary layers of like, well, here's the time when I was doing that thing.
Yeah.
Although I do feel like most of it is all kind of like interwoven and pinnacled at this time in my life. Mm-hmm. But, that was one of the things that I always go through with people is, that words mean what we make them mean, as you're saying, they are intrinsically fairly neutral. I mean, I guess we have an agreement.
There are words that, yeah.
Well, we have an agreement that,
yes.
Certain noises we make or certain just squiggles on a page mean a thing, but the extent to which those land on us is very different. Like, I always give the example that it's like, maybe you were wearing a yellow dress the day you met the love of your life. So for you, yellow means love, Maybe you were wearing that same yellow dress, the day that he died in your arms, tragically. Yeah. And then yellow means loss, you know, in a way that it doesn't for anyone else. That context is ever evolving. That's interesting. Well, let me ask you this then. Do you find yourself when you are coming to know people, do you look at people through the similar lens of gauging them by what they do in their point of view, or do you look at people differently? Because I'll tell you, I very much look at what a person does, very much, because the words can vary, But,
well, so we get them wrong. I mean, one of the, again, as an actor, one of the most wonderful thing about words is that they are completely ineffective. They think of the feeling of love. And all of the myriad of things that can mean. That can be love, that can be romantic love for a parent. It can be love for oneself. It can be love and loss. It can be all those things. And it's a 4-letter word. The word itself is completely ineffective at explaining what that is. So we as human beings have to be actors. We have to bring the subtext, the context to what we're saying. We have to fill that little dumb word that does nothing for us with everything that it means for us. So in a way, that's what's wonderful and tragic about language, is that it doesn't do us a service. It doesn't help us very much. So we all have to be better at that. And I think that, yes, that's why in many ways actions are a bit less complicated in that sense. Also, how many times is it that someone else has accurately, perfectly described you? That's why a lot of actors do that thing where they're like, well, I go through the script and anything that anyone says about my character, I write down as a character trait. And I'm like, but really? Like, what if they're wrong?
Yep.
right? And like, what if it's only a piece of the picture? Like if they say, oh, that person's so arrogant, and you choose to play the role as an arrogant person, I think you're missing the fact that them saying that you're arrogant has more to do with them than it does to do with you. And maybe that's more interesting. Maybe then it's more interesting to go, oh, well, what is it about me that makes them feel insecure, or, about that, there may be something more in that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you could say that, because obviously I'm not here to poop on anybody's process, but I think that would be a terrible thing to I'm going to define how I occur based on
everyone else's perspectives of me. Yeah.
Like what? No.
I mean, it's a very common practice, and it probably works for some people, but for me, I've always sort of been like, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. So when I encounter other people, I will say the first thing that this does for me is empathy. It reminds me that everyone has a story and a very rich, strong perspective that they bring with them. And that, it's not my job to tiptoe, but it's my job to understand that I'm going to be imperfect, they are imperfect, and that this is a collaborative conversation space. And that if someone does take something in a way that I didn't intend it, or even if they respond in a way that I take overly sensitively because they didn't know about my particular things, that trying to be really open and forgiving and curious. I think curiosity is a really helpful tool. So instead of being angry that someone responded to me in a certain way, I'm curious why. And that leads to seeing people and hearing people, which of course we all want and need in this world.
I apologize. I've got kids over, so you might be hearing.
No worries.
I'm like, the wildlings are loose. The lost boys have come for me. Like I'm the hook in this scenario.
It's all good.
Just a net's gonna get thrown over me midway through this conversation.
Thanks.
That's an interesting thing in that you have created, honestly, some of my favorite characters, and we'll get into some of the specifics of that because I love your process of creating characters. But do you find, well, what if any is the difference between a character that you have created out of whole cloth versus a character like Jessica or Karen Page that you were given, but then kind of have the luxury of bringing to life over time, like. What? Right. How is that process different or the same?
Definitely different. I would say, especially because the characters that I've created whole cloth, as you say, are more short-lived, in a sense, they probably aren't as complex or as deep as the ones. And also they tend to be in a gaming scenario where my main goal is to have fun. And especially as a dungeon master, NPCs are archetypes, right? So they're not necessarily, and not always, but for me, more often than not, 90% of the time, they're there to hint to the characters, this is the type of story you're in, or this is the type of character you're encountering. Now, I might, betray you and twist that on its head at some point, but I am using a construct, a simplicity of storytelling in order to sort of help tell the story, rather than this really rich, deep, complex NPC that you met that's going to just hang around for 5 minutes and you'll never see them again.
Right.
So certainly they're a little less complex. So yes, I guess for gaming, I tend to look more at how does this character serve story. When I'm the actor and someone else has written it, and it's about creating a character, especially over a long period, like a multi-season series, I feel more like a wild animal, or I often think of it as like the subject of a documentary almost. And it's my job to spend a lot of time constructively daydreaming, is what I call it, about who, what are the things that are important to this person? What are the experiences that are important? And just create those movies in my brain. What are the items and the people, the targets? And what are my relationship? What do I see when I look at Matt Murdock? What do I see when I look at Bill Compton? And can that be really complicated? Can he be someone who hurt me as well as someone who protects me? Can he be someone who I love and someone who's holding me back? Can he be all of these complex, many different things? And can I have little movies in my head of the moments where I saw that in him? I saw the protector and I saw the vicious animal, right? And let all of that live. And then once that's all been created, my job is to believe it and then just exist. So on set, you are a wild animal and it's their job to capture it in some way. I always caveat, that doesn't mean I'm like not hitting my marks or anything like that. Like I'll move 3 inches to the side to help get your thing.
Right. You're an agreeable wild animal.
Agreeable wild animal. I'm not just like figure it out. I'm anyone you talk to will say I'm a very helpful person on set, but more meaning that I'm not overly concerned with the size. And this is my process. Many other people work differently. I'm not overly concerned with the size of the frame or, what the camera move is beyond just feeling its energy and being able to direct my energy in that way. So I'm really much more about where I am in this physical space. What are the things around me? Who are the people that I'm interacting with? And just kind of staying there, looking through Jessica Hamby's eyes at the world. And then they'll find what they're looking for.
I apologize if you saw me like snickering slightly during your wonderful, brilliant point that you were making. Is when my oldest child was born, True Blood was still on the air.
Yeah.
And there was more than once when I would talk to her, I would be like, "I command you as your maker." I really did do that.
Oh, that's too much.
More than once.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I know. I was about to say, I'm here to tell you it didn't work. She was like, "I'm a baby. I really don't know what's."
Your commands have no power.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm like, she's 14 now. I don't know that it would work anymore if I were to command her as her maker. That would, I don't know if that would land or not. That's a really interesting insight there. And again, for those of you that have jumped in, if you have questions for Deborah, for me, write it in chat with the word question all in caps in front of it. We got some coming in that I'll get to when I can. Now, you create just the most interesting and ingenious characters. When we did Faster Purple Worm, Kill, you created a scientist that was you actually, what's the actual name for the study?
Shoot. I don't know if I remember, but scatology. She studies poop.
She's a poop doctor. Yeah, you made a poop doctor. Right. Like we're playing D&D and we're all going to get killed and you made a poop doctor. Yeah, great.
I was like, she's fascinated by by fecal material.
Right.
Which I'm sure there are people out there who that's what they study and they're fascinated. And I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
uber nerds.
It is an art as well as a science. You can tell a lot about the health of an area based just on that, And then we recently did that one shot for D&D Celebration, which should be required reading for absolutely everyone. It was you, Patrick Rothfuss, Todd Stashwick, Alicia Marie, and Matthew Lillard. All playing monsters on a revenge heist that I ran.
Yes.
It's called The Dungeon and the Dragon. They were magnificent. You should watch the game because they were magnificent. I was merely there.
No, BJ, first of all, it was your concept, which was brilliant from the beginning. You ran it fantastically because we are all kindergartner cats. Like we are just absolutely the perfect mashup of impossible to corral. And yeah, I mean, I had a blast. So what I remember about that is you sent us a thing. You were like, pick any monster between this CR and this CR.
13 and 17. Yep.
Right. And I was going through the list and I knew you meant like a monster, like a beast, but I kept seeing constructs, inanimate objects. And I was like, oh, interesting.
So you created Mechabus. For the people who haven't seen it yet, explain who or what. And I'm telling y'all, as soon as we're over, Google it. I tweeted about it. She tweeted about it. It was D&D Celebration, the Dungeon. You will find it. Watch
We are
it.
Mechabus.
We are
all Mechabus. We are all Mechabus.
Collectively. And arguably, inevitably. We will all be.
We are all inevitably Mechabus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw the Cadaver Collector within the CR range, and I was thinking about it. And I guess so. The Cadaver Collector is essentially sort of a mindless construct that gets summoned by something more powerful than it and sent through battlefields to just like collect souls and kill people. And that's really its only goal or process in life. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was just an interesting idea to be a vehicle. And I thought, well, I know it's mindless in that, but if I homebrewed that the souls that it collected, the cadavers that it collected, that it also collected just like a reflection of their consciousness, not their real consciousness, but like a pod person, like that. And so it became a collectively conscious creature, but still its main goal is to find more souls, add to its, roster of minds, of cadavers, and that it would still could be summoned and follow orders. But that, I don't know, that seemed really fun. And then I had the idea that it could be like a van, like a nerd van, right? And so I was just trying to keep it kind of Sword Coastian, but that the idea that it would be sort of a wagon with like a VW Bug van exterior.
As one does.
As one does, and then it would just be covered in cadavers and skulls and things like that. And then it would be a little metal. I think is also, like this kind of metal. Am I doing it right? I'm not very metal. This way. There you go.
You're incredibly
This
metal.
is Aloha? Yeah. I don't know.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, but yeah, I'm here to tell you, by the transitive property, you're still plenty metal.
Yes.
Deborah. Not only were you a vampire, you chose to be a cadaver collector.
I chose to be a cadaver collector.
Yeah.
But it was fun. And my asks of you were, one, can I be classified as a land vehicle so that they could drive me, which was fantastic because we got around places. And I think, two, could I do that little homebrew switch up that just gave me a tad bit of personality? I didn't want to go too far with it, but that it just had a little bit, it could make some decisions without having to ask its, commander.
So, I'll give you all the TLDR on this. We had a plan for D&D Celebration, and 2 weeks before the show, the whole plan got changed. Like everything, the whole show got rewritten. And they were like, pitch us something.
I remember getting that panic email. I don't know, being like, hey, if you have ideas for new ways to play D&D, let us know.
Yeah, please, we need you. Yeah, and that was it. It was like new ways to play. It was like, we've been doing this 50 years. Okay, new ways. And I was like, Monster Suicide Squad. And I hit you guys up, and everybody, there was only one person that couldn't make it for a scheduling thing, and I won't say who it was, but I mean, my 6 hand-picked people, 5 were in, and I was like, cool, pick a monster. And the first person to reply was Todd Stashwick with an Nalfashi named Cutie Pie.
Yes.
And then Pat Rothfuss was like, well, could I play something like a Teenage Tarrasque? And he meant it like a joke. And I was like, you can literally be a Teenage Tarrasque.
Yeah, why not?
And then you came with Mechabus. And then Alicia Marie was like, I'm a beholder named Bailey. And I was like, oh, this is that game.
Who's on Tinder.
Right. Who runs Monster Tinder. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is that game. That's what we're doing? Yeah. Okay. Because, there was a moment in my head where I was like, this is Aliens, right,
this will be scary.
Yeah, it's going to be like a scary, intense thing. And then I was like, oh, it's going to be not that. Okay, right.
We're going to ride around in a van down by the river and wreak havoc,
my favorite part in all of that, and I pointed out, because it was so subtle, is because you were a VW bus, and when you weren't talking, you would idle.
Yes, I would totally idle.
You would idle.
It would do this little
we were all like, is she idling? Is that what she's doing? So let me ask you a different question here. Y'all watch that. I'm telling you. But as you were putting,
before we jump, I worked very hard on my voice. We are Mechabots was very fun. And then I think in our conversations beforehand, I was like, I kind of think it's a we. I kind of think it's many consciousnesses. And so I don't think I got it right every time. I think I did say I sometimes, but I love the idea that it is a collector. It is a collective consciousness. And yes, the idea that any of us may one day be Mechabus. We are all Mechabus.
We are all Mechabus. Yeah. Well, but even that, you hit an important point that you took a concept, but then you made it your own,
Yeah.
in a way that didn't mechanically mess
Yeah.
with anything. You know what I mean? That you're like,
Exactly.
all right, instead of
it was a purely role-playing homebrew. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of, this mindless two-legged construct, I want to be like a very low intelligence wagon,
Yeah. Exactly.
But I mean, by this point, so many of us have played the game for so long that, I'm a Gloomstalker drow. It's like, okay, but what else though? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
Yeah. What are you gonna do to make us like give a damn about that person? And it's interesting because I'm working on a project that is currently unannounced. You're probably gonna find out probably in the next 2 weeks, 1,000% in the next month. You'll know. It's a pretty big thing. And I was talking with the people about their characters, and I was like, the fact that you're a human swords bard, almost to your previous point, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Is the least interesting thing about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, that's the minimum. That's how we decide what's going to go on this page. That's not who you are. And I kept having to like encourage that out of them, to add a layer of complexity of, who's this, just like what you were talking about with your acting process.
Yeah.
To tie this more directly to TTRPGs, because it's all been definitely relevant, but I mean, to tie it directly. This person has had an existence in this world before now. Like they didn't just emerge full grown and fully armored out of their father's brow like Athena, unless that's your character concept that you're like, no, legit, I did emerge.
Hey, that's it.
Yeah, like
I'm here. But then there's something interesting about having no experience, having ultimate power and strength and ability and no experience of how to handle that or interact with other people. Like if you're going to go that way, lean into the reality of what that is.
It's funny that you say that. The very first stream I ever did, Theogony at Kairos, was about level 0 characters who got level 20 powers that they really had no experience and then suddenly were gods. And I started that originally, I was going to start them off and just be like, boom, you got powers. And I knew if I did that, if I'd been like, oh, that's the bully who's been terrorizing you, they were going to be like, cool, disintegrate. So I spent some time, I think I spent 3.5 episodes with them at level 0, just painting the picture of their world so it would matter. And so it would matter when I imperiled them.
Oh, you mean targets? You were creating targets for them?
Apparently, I've been following your process this entire time. They were done. But
that's part of it. It is intuitive, right? I mean, part of the reason why that is like why Donnellan landed on that and why that works is because it is how our brains and our hearts work. We attach to things in that way. Yeah.
It's funny that you call it targets. I think I would have described it as stakes, but it's still why do I care? You know what I mean? Yeah. Answering that fundamental question.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the interesting things about TTRPGs is, and it varies somewhat by setting, in that if your character's walking down the street and I tell you the orphanage is on fire,
right,
the implication is you should want to intervene.
Right.
Buildings burning are bad. Buildings filled with children burning, that's also bad.
Ultra bad, yeah.
Right, like you have now described it to me. It implies it's important.
Yes.
But there's plenty of games and character concepts where you wouldn't. You play something like Vampire. Not only is fire bad, you're a monster. So you may or may not care, truly.
Yeah.
Like this may or may not be my problem.
Yeah.
And I think
now that's the perspective part. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, which Vampire has accounted for this with some of the coterie rules, that you overtly agree during character creation that it's like we're all together for this specific thing. We may or may not even like each other, but we have a shared thing. And you the group agrees what the thing is. D&D even now, you have parties where it's like, all right, the Vengeance Paladin, who is lawful neutral, is traveling with the chaotic evil rogue, who is, constantly, murdering and stealing things. There is a point that, yes, the characters at the table will coexist because we all understand.
Yes.
but the cognitive dissonance becomes so great that you're like, I would never be with this person.
Right, right, right.
You know?
Right.
And, you know, so that's something that everyone has to account for. You know, the storyteller has to account for, the characters have to account for, because I've been in situations where someone is like, I just wouldn't be with them, and now I'm being obstinate. And well, I'm like, well, now you've stopped the fun. That's not
Right.
cool. That's not cool either.
For sure. I mean, I do think that, at least certainly at my tables, and it sounds like maybe at yours as well, like you said, a base agreement is in play, which is, when people ask me about characters, and they always want to know, like, oh, do I point by standard array, da da da, and and part of me is like, I don't really care. However you want to like generate and build your character, any plane, any existence, any UA, as long as you're not like overpowered, you're welcome. Like build it however you want. I'm more interested in, and mine, I think, if I'm remembering, I think it's about threefold, but have something in you that, some goal, something you want that puts you out for adventure, right? So you're not just someone who would prefer to sit at home on the couch, because then I'm never going to get you. Make it money, make it fame, whatever it is. There's something that motivates you to get out of the house every day. 2, something in you that motivates you to collaborate with your fellow players, whether or not you like them. There's a common good, whether that's survival or a moral sensibility, whatever it is. So if you want to play an evil character, develop within your character the knowledge that you will die if you are alone, if you lose any of your party members. That way you can still save their lives, even if your alignment isn't particularly good. So, it's those kinds of things. Like how do we find a way to make sure that you can be a part of this game in a way that is fun for you, but also doesn't, take away the enjoyment for other players.
Yep.
And I think it is just that. It's cultivating something from that, in that backstory, in that perspective that keeps you in the game. And then my third one has nothing to do with any of that, but it's follow the threads. Yep. So all I say is follow the quests. Yes, I'm happy for you to have a diversion with an NPC or something like that. But like, if I'm like, hey, there's an orphanage with burning children.
Yep.
Just follow the thread, like deal with it however you want.
You're like, that's real rough for those kids. Yeah, right.
Deal with it however you want, but follow the threads.
Yep.
It'll just be easier for all around. I promise you it'll be fun because I've spent a week working on it. So,
Yeah, I always tell people that so many D&D groups are just like, hey, random strangers I met in a bar, you want to go camping for 6 months and become gods? And it's like, yeah, let's do that. It's because everybody's always like, power is so rare. I'm like, nah, you can knock it out in like half a year if you just live. Now, well, let's talk a little bit about that. You were saying that you work on this in these games. Obviously, the work you put in on Relic and Rarities was incredible. I don't think people understand how much of that stuff that you made with your own hand. And you're running games now on Demiplanar.
Yes, I am.
Do you like that seamless transition there?
That was so good. I didn't even notice it. It was so expertly done.
True. You are running games now. A link is about to appear here in chat. But tell everybody, what are Cardinal Adventures?
Yes. So the Cardinal Adventures. So I have created 4 one-shots, essentially, following the cardinal directions. So there is north, south, east, and west are the titles of the 4 adventures. You can play just one. You can play all of them. You can play them in any order. They are designed to sort of be one-shots. However, the more of them you play, the more of the greater mystery of Cardinal Adventures is revealed. Now, I'm not making any promises for some like gigantic, reveal about the nature of the universe or something like that. 42, right? But that, yes, some of the things some of the loose ends and the questions that don't get answered within the single adventures, you'll find more evidence and more information about it as you flow through. And for sure, this is part of a larger concept that I'm working on. And if there's enough demand and Cardinal Adventures Series 1 goes well enough, there may be Cardinal Adventures series 2, and we'll get more information. But we'll have to see how it goes.
No, like, northeast, southwest.
Well, they might not be Cardinal anymore. We'll have to see.
It's true. Well,
I can actually give you that. That's a nice little spoilery tidbit a little bit. I was thinking of series of 4, and that there are so many things that come in sets of 4, and that maybe it would be really fun to do series of 4. So I started with the cardinal directions, but I also thought, spades, hearts, clubs, diamonds, those are fun. Winter, spring, summer, fall, those are fun, so like there are so many different sets of 4 that exist within the world, earth, wind, water, fire. So it's just such a really fun space. And I thought, I could go a really long time doing series of 4, one a year or something like that. It would be pretty great.
Just when you even said series of 4, the elements popped into my mind first, and the only thing I could think was Avatar State. Yep. I think people don't realize just how smart you are, because you're very subtle, but you're freaking brilliant. The things you do in the games, more than once I've been like what? Especially the puzzles with especially because
I do really like puzzles.
Well, I'm, all things being equal, I'm not a puzzle dude, but I do a lot of escape rooms. Well, in the before times,
Well, you're essentially a puzzle dude then.
Well, but what I found with the puzzles is, my friends and I would descend on these rooms just like killer bees and just go through everything.
Right.
And if we can only spend about 3 to 5 minutes on any given puzzle, because then if you didn't get it, you got to rotate. Because because your mind will get it, or your mind will lock up on what you think it is. And I find in my stories when I'm DMing, putting puzzles in a game is always a challenge from a pace standpoint, because they might get it in 30 seconds, or an hour, or never. So how do you compensate for that in your stories?
Sure. So for one little DM trick, sometimes I will have layers of puzzle. So you'll find a puzzle that is symbols, right? And there's a way to solve that puzzle just using the symbols. Or if it sounds like it's going too fast for you, you might have to decrypt those symbols into common. So I have these little layers of different things. And the thing to know about puzzles in general, I know they're very intimidating. The fact is, there's only kind of maybe a dozen different sort of types of puzzles. Beyond that, you're just mixing and matching and adding sort of layers on top. And, like a Sudoku, people go on and on about it, but Sudoku could be numbers. It could also be symbols. It could also be, hash marks. It could be Morse code. You can change anything into another, sort of function. So if you did a Sudoku using Morse code, it would look extremely different than Sudoku, but at its heart, it's still about a box having 9 unique symbols. And if you're using Morse code, it's just interesting that those unique symbols are letters, but they've been translated into, dots and dashes. And that's a little bit more complex to try to figure out. I think for puzzles, really, it's about get yourself look up a few simple ciphers, play a lot of puzzles. So I love the Nancy Drew games by her interactive entertainment. I don't know, one of the, anyways, they're fantastic. At least the older ones are. And they're filled with incredible puzzles. So again, once I kind of learn the basics of how that puzzle works, you can then repurpose that basic puzzle, because that's not IP, right? Like the pouring liquid into 3 different sized jugs until you get the number that doesn't exist just is a puzzle. And you can change that however you'd like to suit your purposes. I think that's a piece of it, is layering. I think also I always offer options. Well, I don't even have to offer it. I allow ways to get around it. So I made for one of my homebrew games, I made a huge puzzle. It was a full bookcase. I wrote out the title of every single book on that shelf. And there was a whole thing that had to do with like repeating letters and how often do they repeat and where do they appear on the books on the thing. And that's how you figured out which ones to pull in which order. I was so proud of it.
I fireballed the bookcase.
Well,
I'm like, cool.
But I generally, I might stop that because that's not terribly creative a solution to me, right? Like you can fireball it. I might allow it, but it might have consequences, you know, like you might lose treasure or you might, you know, like if that was your route to choose to kind of bypass like that, fine. But there might be a consequence to that.
Or
our
the books
rogue
just
was
don't
actually,
burn.
Or they don't burn. Right. Like I can also just say that because I made this world. So deal with it. But our rogue was actually it was Janina Gavankar, actually more brilliant than my puzzle plan or fireballing it. She was like, I run to the kitchen and I get flour and I start to blow it all over the books and see if it sticks to fingerprints. And I was like, she is dusting for fingerprints.
Now, see, that kind of thing I love. And I think that marks a real transition between new players and OG players in the sense that, you know, the old D&D is, I always explain to people, I'm like, the game is explicit. You can do what it says you can do and you cannot do what it doesn't say. Whereas something like a storyteller system is implicit. You know, it's more intention-based. So the old D&D would not have allowed for that. But that level of you have to let that work. You have to let that work. Yeah.
So what it does, I mean, it doesn't give her the order.
Yeah.
But it gives her which books. Like, and essentially, and I had her roll, I don't remember what I had her roll. Maybe an investigation once it was, you know, once she saw to see, you know, she didn't get all of the books. You know, she got 5 of the 6 or something like that. And then she was like, all right, if you guys want to like keep watch, I'll spend an hour. Like you guys go short rest. I won't. And I will spend an hour doing the 6 books, you know, the 5 books in any order until she could figure out what the 6th one was. And again, I was sort of like, I buy that because one, she's taking the risk of not resting herself. And the others, I ended up having them have a little fight while she was, and that's another DM puzzle trick that I'll offer. Give them, once you know that they know how to do it, give them a time limit. It just is, like you said, it can, for sometimes puzzles can feel like a down spot. So as soon as she was like, okay, the only way I know how to do this now is brute force it. I don't, I don't have it. I can't figure out literally, but that will lead eventually to a success. It just takes time. Then I go, great, you go ahead and do that. But your party without you is now going to have a fight. And this is their only way out. So the sooner you get that door open, the faster. And so then I just had her doing on her initiative, her investigation checks to get through it faster. And it added this kind of, and in Relics, actually, she was in a similar position in episode 3 or 4. Sorry. I had a puzzle where they had to literally fill in with color on a big, you know, board that drawing that I made. And they had to get it right before the, you know, mummies came in and killed them all. So again, it added this real life time element where on everyone else's initiative, they're fighting, but on these 2 people's initiative, they're frantically coloring things in. And it just added a lot of fun.
I will say one thing I will do is I almost, especially if I see them really struggling, I will always give things like insight or perception checks for a hint. You know,
I do investigation checks for a hint.
Investigation for a hint, because that is one thing I cannot stand, because I had an experience recently, and I have to be incredibly vague or else you will be able to figure out exactly what I'm talking about, where we were in a trap and it just was, we just had no clue. And it was obvious. We had no clue. And we just were sitting there, you know, and then it's like, no one's having a good time right now. You know what I mean? Versus it would be so simple to be like, you notice that guy's walking with a weird limp. That guy? You know what I mean? And then now the juices are flowing again. You know what I mean?
100%.
You know,
you always get investigation checks for hints from me. And also trying to figure out how to do the puzzle is only fun for a short while. at least in my opinion. It's more fun once you know how to solve it. That's really exciting. Then it's the fun of actually doing the decryption, the doing all of that work of fixing the cipher and putting it in the right place. And that can also be really exciting. So, and that I think is more, because it's active, it's more exciting innately. So I try to have the time period we're trying to figure out how to solve the puzzle be shorter and offer more hints. And that, it's definitely a place where I can be like, all right, what's your passive? Yeah. What's your passive perception? Oh, well, you're off in the corner over there. From that angle, you can see, something like that. And it helps guide them. And as soon as they know how, then you see eyes light up. Because my goal with puzzles is never to make anyone feel stupid or like they can't do it. Right. It's the opposite. It's to give people who are maybe not as good at puzzles an opportunity to feel really brilliant. Yeah.
Let me just say one last call for questions, because I'm going to dive into some of these soon. Again, write it in chat, put capital question in front of it, and I'm going to pose a couple of these. Can't pose all of them, but I'm going to pose a lot of these. Yeah, let me just say one last thing about the puzzles before I ask you a different question. Is we did an escape room once, and same thing, we come in and we just do stuff, and there was it was like an old-timey switchboard, like, when the operator used to have to connect calls. Yeah. And I walked up to it, and I looked at it, and I was like, I know what this is, and I was like, boom, 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 and a key fell out. And we got all the way to the end. We finished the escape room, and the person, the monitor was like, I have to know, how'd you do that? Like, how did you possibly know that? Like, there's no way, because you didn't have the clues or anything. Right. And it turns out I had the right answer for the completely wrong reason.
I love that.
Like, I thought it was like states of, like, the names of capitals or something, and it actually was the periodic table. Like, it was something like...
Yeah. That
happened to work.
Amazing.
The dude was like, there's no way you knew that. And
amazing.
I'm like, womp womp.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this one last more philosophical question, and then we'll talk about some of these questions here. What do you think a dungeon master's job is?
I mean, fun first and kind of only. And that doesn't necessarily mean, being nice to players all the time. Sometimes it means being a little maniacal, right? Like, the times when my players laugh the most is when they're like, oh, when you play tested this, how many of your players got through it? And I go, most of them, and that's when they go, oh my God, there's fun in being a little scared, a little bit of risk. So fun isn't necessarily always being, acquiescing. But I do think the first and foremost job is to make it feel like they are on an adventure. They get to feel like the Goonies. They get to feel like Indiana Jones. They, that, at least for me, that's what I want when I play D&D. So maybe stylistically people are different, but that's what I'm trying to offer. So a lot of me, when I DM, a lot of it is also, how do I make anything that you do, even a flub, feel cinematic and exciting? So even if you flub, is it this like crazy, this like, as you step forward to take on the evil mage, your foot slips out from under you, you fall flat on your face as you turn your head up towards her, you can see her looming above you, the wet dirt on the side of your cheek, so that there's an epicness to these moments. So it really does feel like that flub. It's not about, I didn't get to do my attack. It's about, the tables have turned, and letting it live in that kind of epic storytelling moment. But yeah, so I'm there to make everyone feel like a hero, I think.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And again, that's one of those like differences between OG D&D and now. And don't get me wrong, some people were telling the stories that all along that way.
Yeah.
But D&D in general is a binary pass-fail system. If you exceed the target number by 30 points, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you crit, maybe you get something different, but it doesn't matter. Right. If you miss by 1, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
You know, like you did it or you did not do it. And so adding that flavor to it is what helps bring the whole thing to life and like really make it an immersive experience for the players.
Well, that's also why checks can be really fun. Like I'm a big believer that DCs aren't necessarily a pass fail.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you do an insight check and their deception is a 15 and you roll a 14, I don't go, well, you don't get it. You don't notice anything. I might say that's a fairly good roll. They don't get the information, but they might get more information on a 14 than they get on a 5.
Right.
And even if they get a 16, they might get generally, they match her, they might get generally what's going on. But if they roll a 19, I might give them a little something extra that clues them into ways that she might be manipulated. So I like to use skill checks on a sliding scale like that and say that it kind of matters what the actual roll is rather than just the pass fail.
For my money, the DM's job is to elicit an emotional response.
Oh, okay.
Because whatever is happening at the table, if they're nodding their head yes, if they're shaking their head no, if they're laughing, if they're crying, if they're
right,
they are engaged. Your only enemy is meh. Your only enemy is like as long as like a human reaction is happening, you are succeeding.
Well, fun is a human reaction. So I feel like we are.
I'm super with you with fun though, because if you get to the end of the campaign and people were like, "Well, that was some BS," they won't be back. But I guess the reason why I stopped short of just labeling it as fun is there's times that it should be enjoyable, but like there's times there's definitely games where it's like cathartic. Like
I guess I tend to not lean that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's I think just a personal preference space of it. I'm not really in D&D for catharsis. I think it happens to me in my real life with D&D just because I am constantly searching for acceptance, and D&D is someplace where I feel that.
I love and accept you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. But I D&D at its heart for me is an adventure game.
Mm-hmm.
And that again is not to poo-poo in any way people who do play it for the more intense, deeper, cathartic experiences of it. But those are rarely my games. I'm really much more swords and sorcery and adventure, high adventure tastes. Which is totally fine. Which is I think also like you're obviously a huge ambassador for the vampire space. And the few times that I've played, I can feel, oh, this isn't quite my wheelhouse. Like I keep wanting to like push for action. And the game is really much more about that social intrigue and pushing one's comfort boundaries. And I'm uncomfortable all of the time in my life. So when I go to play D&D, I'm looking a bit more for the escapism.
Makes total sense. I kept saying that I wasn't going to ask all the questions. And then when I put out that last thing, we got a wave of like a ton of them. So now I definitely cannot answer them all. But this one I'm going to try and paraphrase because I don't know that I want to completely ask the question as written. What have you found both challenging? Well, what have you found to be the most challenging and the most rewarding of the Cardinal adventures of running these games? That's a simple one, right?
Yeah. So the challenging has certainly been time commitment
mm-hmm.
and like the organizational clerical piece of it. So I'm, probably being too helpful in that I was like, hey, come. Here are some available dates. Tell me which ones you prefer. I'll figure it out. And I made a spreadsheet and I'm putting everybody in, and
mm-hmm.
clocking everyone. So that's been just man hours,
mm-hmm.
much more time than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, luckily, I wrote the adventures. I ran them. There's some revisions that I'm doing along the way, and obviously notes from in-game that I have to keep track of.
Mm-hmm.
But the current amount of like every day checking in on the portals to answer questions and look at character sheets and sort of schedule people and your link isn't working and that kind of thing is much more than I thought it would be. And then also just this is now every Saturday and Sunday, 4 to 5 hours of my day. And I happened to like just get busy at the same time as I started all of it because that's how Laws of Chaos work.
Of course.
Yes. So that's been the hardest part, is kind of time management, figuring out how to work in my life, my work, and Cardinal kind of all at once, and give it all everything I've got. The most rewarding part is that absolutely, even though I played North with 6 different groups, 7 if you include my playtest. I'll be playing South with 10 different groups. It is no single adventure has gone in any way the same.
Yep.
Not even like small things. Like every single choice, things that I would have been like, oh, this is an obvious answer of how to do this. Nope. It is, and that is so wonderful. And as a dungeon master, I think we very rarely play the exact same material with multiple groups that many times. So this is a very unique experience for me. And to really be like, and it's fun for me because I'm completely open. It's all improv at that point. I'm just kind of like, great, I never thought of that. Go for it. Let's give it a shot. This is about what I think that DC should be. But again, that's why I like my idea of a sliding scale DC. It isn't just pass or fail. It's how well you pass at it in a way or fail at it. So because we're doing so much improv, and I'm like, I've never thought of that. So I certainly haven't written down a difficulty class for that particular thing. But I feel like it's around a 13. And then I have this rule. One of my homebrew rules, I think actually because I never played the editions before 4, but someone told me maybe this was an earlier edition rule-ish as well. But I like stacking modifiers for helping rather than advantage. So I like the idea that it matters who helps you.
That's how it used to be, yeah.
Yeah, and also how they help you. So I will allow your squishy wizard who has no strength to use their intelligence to show you the footfalls as you lift the big tree so that they can add their intelligence modifier to your strength. Now, the trouble you can get into that is that you could just keep stacking and stacking and stacking, and things could be nothing.
Which also used to happen.
And there's still obviously a roll involved. But what I warn players is, because I allow this rule, I have some difficulty classes that you can't make on your own. There's no possible way at the level that you're at, even if you rolled a 20, that you'd hit my DC. And I'm not giving it to you because it's a 20. You'll do well, but you won't necessarily succeed. So I give that caveat to encourage them to help one another. So whenever they think, oh my God, we have to roll this boulder up a hill, we better all get in the game. So that gives me a lot of freedom, where if they come up with a really crazy, impossible idea, I can be like, okay, sure, try it. And then in my mind, I'm going, but the DC for that's like 30.
Yep.
So good luck.
Good luck.
Know?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's definitely times too that I'll have them roll and I don't even have a DC in mind. I'm like, do I think that's good enough? I'm all like, you're 17? 17?
All right.
You know?
Yeah, 100%.
Seems legit.
100%.
You know, again, a lot of these questions, again, we don't have time to get to them all. I apologize. A lot of them are like, you know, can you tell us about this project? Can you tell us about that project?
Oh, yeah.
Of course, we cannot tell.
We cannot.
We cannot. NDA bullets appear. But you got lots of fans and lots of stuff you've done,
Yay,
Deborah.
very cool.
Comes as a total shock.
I'm so excited.
Thank
you all for enjoying those properties so much and wanting so much more of them. I've loved all of the jobs that I've had, and you know, it's just been a pleasure. So that's my blanket. Thank you. I'm sorry I can not give you what you want.
I do want to give you a chance to plug the podcast, though.
Okay, great.
So
Truest Blood, yeah. Yeah, so Janina Gavankar, Kristen Bauer, and myself, we are producing with HBO a True Blood. It's essentially a rewatch podcast, but we're going a little bit different with it, rather than just sort of talking about episodes on their own. While we'll certainly do a little recap and things, we're bringing in a lot of deep dives. So each episode hopefully will have a deep dive into what was the blood and how did they make it and what did it taste like and how did the fangs work and the opening title credits. And, you know, so a lot of really interesting people that we've spoken to. We'd like to really highlight this sort of collaborative, takes a village nature of this industry. And, you know, pull the curtain away maybe a little bit and say, you know, your favorite scene that you watched, you know, a dozen times, this is really what it took to get it there, and really honor the many crew, the many, personnel that it takes to get something like that done.
And where can people find that?
You on my socials, you'll see links to it. But also, I think, HBO, anywhere you get your podcasts, just search Truest Blood. It's not out yet. We're still putting it together, but it's been announced, and you can get a notification so that you know once it is.
I know this is going to come as a complete and total shock, but we're actually at time. That's how fast it goes.
Are we really? Oh my
gosh. So many more things to discuss, but we're here. So, you mentioned your socials. What are your socials? Yes. Where can people find you?
Oh, gosh. It's Deborah Ann Woll on all the things. I don't really know, if I'm honest. It's my name. You search me, you'll find them, which is certainly fine. And come to Cardinal Adventures. In the there's the link. It'll be there's a pregame waiting room.
I don't know where the link is. It's here. It exists. Yeah.
It's a pregame waiting room where you can essentially come in. Once I announce dates, the next game will be East. Probably I'll announce a little later this month dates for East. And once they do, you can give me your availability, and you'll be entered into my very fancy spreadsheet, and I'll figure it all out. But it's just me. So you'll come there and you'll get a message from me that's like, hi, welcome. And what do you want? I'm excited to play D&D with you. So.
Let me ask you just one last question, because I know we're wrapping this up, but this was interesting.
Oh, and I should also say it's paid. So it's not a free.
Yes. Right. They're paid games.
Paid games. They are paid games.
Yes.
Paid games on Demiplanar.
We are not the March of Dimes. Yes, correct.
I'm so sorry. It is a job for me.
We just have to cough and extend the hand there. Yeah. With your plan of potentially doing more, if the appetite is there, have you thought, because somebody asked this, Sharkane24, have you thought about it being an overarching thing where perhaps there's character progression, where the same characters from the Cardinal ones come back again?
That is Paul. I know Paul is playing through Cardinal Adventures with me currently. Mm-hmm. What's up, Paul? But yes, no, that would absolutely be the plan. So the series of 4, should they continue, would be part of this universe that I'm sort of building right now, and that I have most of, but definitely need to flesh out. And yes, if you played your character through Cardinal, this would probably, these are level 4 adventures. If I did another one, probably level 5. The idea being that each year you could level up, you could take that character through. But I also want to make sure that it is available to people who don't want to, that's a lot of money to fit in as well. Make sure that I really want this to be accessible. Mm-hmm. I want this to be, if you have never played D&D and you just want to try it, this is a way you can do it. If you've been playing forever, this is a way you can do it. If you want to play 1, if you want to play 2, if you want to play 20, this is a way you can do it. So, certainly continuing and adding perks for people who want to go all the way through, but keeping it fun for those who just do a couple.
Because what kind of monster would just drop new people in high-level content? So, thank you, Deborah, for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you haven't signed up for Demiplanar yet, sign up for your free account. You can play games with your friends, find some friends to play games with, and maybe even play games with Deborah Ann Woll. Deborah Ann Woll. So, thank you so very much, and we will see you next week. And now's the time that I have to announce who our next guest is, which is Abria Iyengar. So, Abria and I will be deep diving next week.
So exciting.
Because apparently that's what I do now, is just get to wax philosophical about role-playing games with my favorite people. So thank you all. Day. Thank you, Deborah. And we'll see you all next week. Oh, I guess we'll see you tomorrow morning for our dev update right here, 9 a.m. Tomorrow night, Heroes of the Plains. We beat the devil. I'm sure everything's going to be fine now, right? It's going to be all good. Yeah. All right.
Devil really likes it when they lose. So.
He seemed a bit cross, but, we're going to find out. We largely were unconcerned with his needs at that point, to tell you the truth. I will tell you this, Deborah. When we beat him, I made a point to bury him. I gave him a holy burial. I consecrated the ground Asmodeus was buried in.
Good luck.
One less ancestral halfling gesture out the window there. All right.
Good luck.